I should have known from the moment I looked in the mirror that morning. The dress fit perfectly. The light through the window was soft, golden, almost theatrical, like the universe was holding its breath with me. But in the pit of my stomach, something felt wrong. Not nerves, not fear, just a pressure, like joy trying to bloom in soil that hadn't been cleared of its roots. Still, I smiled, because it was my wedding day. And I was going to have a good day, no matter what. My name was on the invitation, my hands had written the guest list. My partner and I had saved for over 2 years to afford this moment. This was ours. And yet, even as I stood barefoot in my bridal suite, lace trailing behind me, I felt them, my family, lingering like an uninvited wind, not loud, just heavy. "Are you ready?" My maid of honor, Jess, poked her head in. She had tears in her eyes already, which made me laugh through my own. "I think so," I said. "Does it look like I'm shaking?" "No," she said. "You look like someone who knows exactly what she's doing." I nodded. Even if I didn't feel it, I could wear it. My mom arrived 20 minutes late to the final dress fitting. No apology, just a distracted glance and, "It's a little much for an outdoor wedding, don't you think?" She wore cream. Of course she did. My dad said almost nothing all morning, just hovered behind her like a dull echo. And Lena? Lena made herself the center of everything, like she always had. She had opinions on the floral arrangements, on the DJ's set list. She even offered to adjust the seating chart despite not having helped plan a single detail. "She's just excited," my mom said, brushing it off. No, she was performing, smug, intrusive, a little too interested in things that weren't hers. I knew that face. I'd seen it since we were children. That expression Lena wore right before she said something she knew would get her in trouble, but enjoyed too much to keep inside. I tried to focus on the joy. The ceremony was beautiful. My partner's vows made the whole front row cry. The way they looked at me, like I was the only person who had ever mattered, reminded me why I had worked so hard to make this day perfect. I could feel real love in that space. It made the tension at the edges of the room feel smaller, distant, almost manageable, almost. Then came the reception. I hadn't even made it to the head table yet. I was walking through the crowd, being tugged into hugs, stopping for photos, catching glimpses of friends I hadn't seen in years. And then Lena grabbed my arm. Her nails dug just slightly into the fabric of my sleeve. Her face, tilted perfectly for the photographer nearby, wore a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You look gorgeous," she said sweetly. "Really. Like, professionally airbrushed." "Thanks," I said stiffly. She leaned in, her cheek grazing mine like she was about to whisper a compliment. And that's when she said it. "Mom and Dad are giving your wedding gift money to me." The smirk, the pause, to let it sink in. Then she pulled back, still smiling for the camera, and walked away without another word. Everything around me froze. The clinking of glasses, the laughter, the music cue for the couple's first dance. I just stood there, surrounded by joy I couldn't access. What? What did she just say? I felt my throat tighten, the blood rush from my face. I blinked once, hard, trying to reset the moment. But it didn't budge. She said it. She meant it. And judging by her tone, she was telling the truth. I scanned the crowd for my parents. My mother was laughing with an aunt. My father was taking photos of Lena, who was already on the dance floor like she'd rehearsed for this. There was no trace of guilt on either of them. No subtle glance my way. No sense that anything was off. Because to them, this wasn't off. This was planned. I turned back toward Jess, who was talking with the caterer. I thought about telling her, about pulling someone aside and screaming, "Can you believe what they just did?" but I didn't. Because if I cried now, it would be about them. And this day wasn't for them. I inhaled slowly, smoothed the front of my dress, blinked back the sting behind my eyes. Then I walked toward my partner, who was waiting by the cake with a look that could still undo me in a second. And I decided, they may have taken the check, but they won't take this moment. Not today. The rest of the reception moved like a play I was acting in. I smiled, I danced, I kissed, but something had changed inside me. A quiet wall had gone up, not to protect me from hurt, to prepare me for something else. Because in that one whispered moment, Lena had made something very clear. This wasn't just a petty decision. This was a message. You don't deserve more than me, even on your own wedding day. And the worst part? My parents agreed. Later that night, as my partner and I sat in the hotel suite surrounded by cards and torn wrapping paper, I opened the envelope from my parents. No check, no note, just a generic congratulations card. Signed, Love, Mom and Dad. I stared at it for a long time, and all I could think was, they didn't forget. They just gave it to her. I placed the card face down, and that's when something in me, something buried for years, began to rise. It wasn't rage, it wasn't grief, it was a vow, not just to remember, but to change the story. I didn't sleep the night of the wedding. My partner slept soundly, arm wrapped around me, warm and safe, but my body refused to rest. My mind paced laps in the dark. Because what Lena said wasn't just cruel. It was familiar, too familiar. That smirk on her face, like she'd won something that never should have been hers, it had a long history. And that card from my parents? The empty envelope pretending to mean something? It wasn't new. It was a pattern, a perfectly rehearsed one. And I'd been cast in the same role my entire life, the reliable one. The afterthought. The girl who would understand. Lena was the kind of child people called spirited. She threw tantrums in grocery stores, screamed during road trips, slammed doors with Olympic force. And every time she did, my mother would look at me and say, "Just let her work through it, okay? She's sensitive." But when I cried, when I got overwhelmed, when I needed space or had an opinion that didn't match theirs, I was dramatic, unreasonable, too emotional. It didn't make sense until I got older. The problem wasn't how I expressed my feelings. The problem was that I didn't make theirs more comfortable. Lena's birthday parties always had themes. One year, it was a garden tea party, complete with rented miniature horses and custom invitations printed on pink cardstock. Mine was at home. Sheet cake, a handful of cousins. If I was lucky, they didn't forget to buy candles. When I was 8, I asked why Lena got to have her party at a water park. My dad just laughed and said, "Well, she really needs something to look forward to. You've always been a little more grounded." I didn't know what that meant at the time. Now I do. It meant you'll survive without it. She won't. That became the family motto. Every time Lena struggled, the spotlight turned to her like she was on a stage. Every minor inconvenience became a crisis. Every reckless decision, a misunderstanding. When she flunked 2 classes in high school, she's just distracted. It's a rough time for her. When she borrowed $2,000 from my parents to cover rent and spent it on a spontaneous trip to Miami, she's still figuring things out. When she forgot my college graduation because she was nursing a breakup, she said she felt really bad about it. That was the extent of the consequences. She felt bad. Meanwhile, I was expected to carry myself like a soldier. I made honor roll. They nodded. Good. I got into a respected university. they told me to look into scholarships so I wouldn't burden them. I graduated early, paid my own rent, bought my first car outright. No parties, no flowers, no acknowledgement beyond a thumbs up from my dad and a distracted, "That's great, sweetie," from my mom. But when Lena landed a receptionist job at a dentist's office, they sent a family-wide email titled, "Big News for Our Girl." By the time we were adults, the favoritism had calcified. Holidays always revolved around Lena's schedule. She'd arrive late, demand to change the menu, and somehow leave with leftovers packed just in case, even when she didn't help with a single dish. When I got engaged, my mother's first comment wasn't congratulations.
It was, "Oh, do you think Lena will be okay with that? You know how she gets when she feels left behind." Left behind. She wasn't the one who had spent 29 years watching her family cheer for someone else. Money? That was its own battlefield. When I needed help during my first year out of college, rent, utilities, anything, I didn't even ask. I knew better. My dad once said, "You're the type who'll always land on her feet. We're proud of that." Which sounded like a compliment. Until I learned they co-signed a car loan for Lena after she'd defaulted on her last one. They didn't even tell me. I found out when Lena bragged about it over Christmas dinner. "Oh, relax," she said with a laugh. "It's not like I'm stealing from you." But it always felt like that, didn't it? She didn't just get more. She took mine. One year, my partner and I offered to host Thanksgiving. We cooked, cleaned, planned everything.
Lena showed up 3 hours late, announced she didn't like turkey anymore, and spent the evening scrolling through her phone. Then, 2 days later, my mom told me she and my dad were giving Lena a little something extra for Christmas. When I asked why, she said, "Because she seemed down." I looked at the modest gift we got from them that year, 2 mugs and a tea towel. It didn't matter that I never complained, that I showed up, that I worked. It only mattered that I didn't make a scene. The wedding wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was just the first time they said it out loud. Lena didn't hide it behind excuses. She didn't sugarcoat it. She smirked. She knew I'd freeze, that I wouldn't make a scene, that I wouldn't cry or scream or throw a drink across the room. Because I never had. Because I was raised to believe that being the calm one was my strength. But what I finally realized, lying awake after the reception, was this. They didn't value my calm, they used it. They counted on it. So they could keep choosing her without consequence. The gift money was never the point. It was the symbol. Of every time they let Lena step in front of me and called it love. Of every moment I bit my tongue so they wouldn't accuse me of ruining the mood. Of every holiday, every birthday, every silence I swallowed to keep the peace. And as I stared at the ceiling that night, I knew something had shifted. This wasn't about jealousy. It was about survival. Because if I didn't end the pattern now, it would never stop. They'd take from my future, from my children, from my joy, from the parts of me that hadn't even bloomed yet. Not because they meant harm, but because they had never once considered that I deserved protection too. I didn't respond. When Lena leaned in and whispered what she did, I didn't flinch. I didn't ask her to repeat it. I didn't let her see what she'd just detonated. I just smiled. Not a real one. Something polite and practiced. The kind of smile you wear when you're trying not to drown in front of a crowd. She peeled away like nothing had happened, laughing with a groomsman like she hadn't just set fire to the most important day of my life. I stood there, alone in a sea of people, the music rising behind me like a curtain I didn't ask to fall. And I pretended not to hear her, because if I did, if I really allowed myself to process what she'd said, I wouldn't make it through the night. I danced, I toasted, I hugged relatives I hadn't seen in a decade, I smiled for photos, thanked the caterers, clinked glasses during speeches that mentioned how strong and steady I had always been. Lena gave one of those speeches. Of course she did. She stood up, glass in hand, tears that weren't real glistening in her eyes. My sister, she said, has always been the quiet light in our family, the one who holds everything together. I watched her, the same way you'd watch a house guest slip something into their purse on the way out. She knew what she was doing. Everyone clapped. I drank water. My partner held my hand beneath the table. Their eyes searched mine, concerned. You okay? I nodded. Just tired. They leaned in. You sure? Yeah, it's just a lot. They didn't press. They never did. That's what I loved about them. They trusted me to come forward when I was ready. The problem was, I didn't know if I'd ever be ready to explain this kind of pain. Because how do you tell someone that the people who raised you have always seen you as the one who could afford to be hurt? By the end of the night, the band was packing up, the last guests were saying their goodbyes, and I felt like I had held my breath for 12 straight hours. My feet ached. My cheeks were sore from forced smiling. My heart? Numb. But I made it. That was my victory. Not joy, not warmth, just survival. The next morning, we opened the gifts in our hotel suite. It was supposed to be a happy ritual. Champagne, laughter, sweet cards filled with well wishes, and for a little while, it was. Until I picked up the envelope from my parents. Plain. No handwriting. Just my name printed on a card in stiff, generic font. Inside, a standard congratulations message. No note, no check, not even a signature. I flipped it over like there might be something tucked inside. Nothing. Just empty paper and the weight of silence. My partner paused. Is that from your mom and dad? I nodded slowly. Yeah. They tilted their head. That's it? I tried to smile, but I could feel it wobbling. They must have forgotten, I said. Or maybe they're giving it to us later. But I already knew the truth. I had known it the night before. I was just hoping, desperately, pathetically, that Lena had been lying, that she'd said it just to get under my skin, to ruin my mood, that it wasn't true. But the empty card said otherwise. 2 hours later, we met my parents in the hotel lobby before they left town. My mother hugged me like everything was fine. You looked beautiful, she said. Everything was perfect. My father nodded. Really well done. You both should be proud. Then my mother added, casually. So casually, I almost missed it. We hope you're not upset about the gift. Lena's just going through a hard time. We thought you'd understand. That was it. No apology, no shame. Just a quiet expectation that I would once again put my feelings away and make room for my sister. I swallowed hard, and I said, of course, I understand. Because I did. Not in the way they meant it, not in the way they expected. I understood that they had never planned to give me anything. I understood that Lena's struggle, real or exaggerated, would always matter more than my milestones. I understood that even on my wedding day, they had looked at their 2 daughters and decided the one who already had less could afford to be given even less. Later that evening, my partner and I walked through the city, trying to come down from everything. They asked if I wanted to talk. I said no, because it wasn't a conversation. It was a reckoning. Back in our suite, I opened Lena's envelope. She gave us a card with a gift card inside, to a restaurant chain, the kind with plastic chairs and kids' menus, a throwaway gesture. And then, scrawled across the bottom in her handwriting, you don't need their money anyway. No, I didn't. But that wasn't the point. The point was, they gave it away like it had never belonged to me. And they let her smirk about it. They let her stand there in my day, in my dress code, in my photos, knowing she had taken something meant for me, and that I wouldn't stop her. Because that's what they were all used to. Me not making a scene, me understanding, me letting it go. But this time, something inside me didn't let go. Not fully. Something cracked open. Not a breakdown, not a tantrum, just a quiet decision. Never again. I looked around at the cards and crumpled wrapping paper, the piles of sweet gifts and kind messages, the sunlight pouring in through the balcony window, and I thought to myself, they think this was the end of the story, but it's only the beginning. They weren't wrong. Lena was struggling, but so was I. They just never looked close enough to see it. My parents spoke of Lena's pain like it was sacred. Any time she stumbled, and she stumbled often, it was treated like a family emergency. They'd rearrange schedules, wire her money, soften her landings before she even hit the ground. She's not like you, my mom would say. She needs more support. She's fragile. And I believed them. For a long time, I let them put me in the strong box, the low-maintenance box, the you'll be fine box. But they never once asked what it cost me to keep that box sealed shut. My partner and I paid for our wedding entirely ourselves. We didn't ask for help. Not because we didn't need it, but because we already knew what the answer would be. We took extra shifts. We trimmed down every luxury. Late nights spent building playlists, comparing rental quotes, designing DIY invitations because professional ones cost too much. I remember sitting at our tiny kitchen table, slicing cardstock with a dull paper cutter while my partner addressed envelopes with a cramping hand. We made it work, not because we had extra, but because this was our one day, our one chance to feel celebrated, to feel seen. Meanwhile, Lena's life was a storm she never had to clean up. She burned through 3 apartments in 4 years, tried and failed to start a candle business, then a blog, then a consulting firm that never had a single client. Every reset came with a financial ask, and every ask came with a guilt trip. She once called me crying because she'd spent her rent money on a spiritual retreat. I offered to help her set up a budget. She never called again. But 2 weeks later, my mom casually mentioned they were covering her rent for the next 3 months. She's just going through a lot right now, she said. When wasn't she? It wasn't that I didn't care, I did. For years, I bent myself sideways, trying to love her better, to be the kind of sister who offered empathy without resentment.
But what they never understood, what Lena never understood, was that support without boundaries isn't kindness. It's enabling. And in their eyes, Lena's chaos always deserved more compassion than my stability did praise. Even at the wedding, she barely made it through the ceremony without making it about herself. She showed up late to the hair appointment, blamed traffic, and then demanded we redo her curls because they weren't voluminous enough. She flirted with one of my partner's cousins during the vows. She requested her favorite song for the DJ and threw a tantrum when it wasn't played early enough. And still, my parents looked at her like she was the sun. Meanwhile, I was standing there in a dress I had worked months to afford, wearing shoes I found on sale, forcing a smile while holding back a scream. They saw her need. They never saw mine. I was struggling too. I had just come out of the most exhausting year of my life. My job had cut hours. We moved twice to stay within budget. My partner got sick that spring, and I spent 2 months juggling caretaking and planning a wedding at the same time. We clipped coupons. We skipped date nights. We canceled a weekend trip for our anniversary just to save money for the florist deposit. Not once did I call my parents to ask for help. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew I wasn't the kind of daughter they came running for. When they gave my gift money to Lena, they didn't just hurt me financially. They declared, clearly, finally, that even at my highest moment, I was still expected to make room for her need. Even on the day meant to celebrate my joy, They chose her struggle. That was when it hit me. It wasn't about money. It never was. It was about worth. And they had made their choice. They had spent a lifetime teaching me to expect less, and I had mistaken that for humility. I thought staying quiet was mature. I thought letting things slide meant I was kind. I thought patience was strength. But what it really did was train them to ignore me, to assume that because I could handle it, I should. And Lena? She cried louder. She needed more, so they gave her more. Not because she deserved it, but because it was easier than looking at me and admitting they had neglected the daughter who never asked. I think that's what hurt the most. Not the missing check, not the smug whisper, not even the blank card. What hurt was knowing that they didn't even feel conflicted. There wasn't a moment of hesitation, no apology in their voices. They looked at me like they always had, the daughter who would understand, the daughter who could carry it. And in that moment, I realized I couldn't anymore. Not for them, not for Lena, not for a family dynamic built entirely on imbalance and silence. I spent so many years thinking that if I was good enough, calm enough, generous enough, they'd finally treat me the way they treated her. But there's no reward for playing the role they gave you. There's only more silence, more invisible labor, more grace handed out without return. So I let the anger rise. I didn't act on it, not yet. But I let myself feel it, not to punish them, to free myself. Because the moment I stopped making excuses for them was the moment I began building something they could never take from me. A life that didn't depend on being understood. A life that didn't wait for someone else to finally say, "You mattered just as much." Because I did. I always did. They just never noticed. I never explained. Not to my parents, not to Lena, not to the relatives who called asking why I hadn't returned texts. I didn't send a dramatic message or write a long letter or schedule some family sit-down. I simply vanished. One day I was the daughter who always showed up, the sister who always forgave, the quiet one who smiled her way through being passed over, and then I was gone, blocked, emails unanswered, calls ignored, group chats left without ceremony. I didn't owe them a performance, not after everything, not anymore. At first, the silence was terrifying. Cutting off your family feels like tearing out an organ, especially when you've been raised to believe that love equals loyalty, no matter how painful it gets. But pain had been my constant companion for years, and this time, I wasn't interested in healing it just enough to keep repeating it. I didn't want to be the better person. I wanted to be free. My partner stood by me, never once questioned the decision. When I said I was done, they just nodded. "Good," they said. "They don't deserve you." I cried in their arms that night, not out of sadness, but relief. The kind that feels like breathing with your whole lungs for the first time in years. Then, slowly, something unexpected started to bloom. I had spent so much time planning my wedding, handling every detail, navigating every obstacle with care. And through all of it, I realized I was really good at this, at vision, at logistics, at managing chaos without letting it consume joy. So one night, still raw from the family fallout, I looked at my partner and said, "What if we turn this into something real?" They blinked. "You mean, like a business?" I nodded. "Yeah, not just events, not just weddings. Something better. Something people like us needed." They smiled. "Let's do it." We started from scratch. A single website, one social media account, free gigs for friends and colleagues to build a portfolio. But word spread fast. Because we weren't just selling wedding planning, we were building safety. A space where no one had to feel small on their own day, where boundaries were honored, where chosen family mattered just as much, if not more, than blood. We called it Vow and Bloom, because vows are promises, and blooming, that's what happens when people are finally seen. The first paid client cried during the consultation. She was marrying into a family who didn't accept her. We helped her design a celebration that felt like her, not them. By the end of the night, she hugged me and said, "You made me feel like I belonged in my own story." That's when I knew we were building more than a business. We were creating reclamation. Vow and Bloom exploded. Within 2 years, we had a waiting list. Luxury clients, destination events, features in bridal magazines, podcasts, influencer blogs. But the best part? Every couple we worked with came in carrying their own version of what I had survived. Overlooked daughters, queer couples, people who had spent their whole lives trying to shrink themselves to be loved. I saw them, and they saw me. Not as a wounded girl, as a woman who had turned her pain into power. I didn't talk about my family in interviews. If people asked why I started the business, I told them the truth, without the details. I just wanted people to have the kind of wedding I never got. They always understood. Some nodded with a knowing sadness. Others squeezed my hand. A few just said, "Same." Every time I stood at the back of a venue, clipboard in hand, watching another couple kiss under lights I'd personally arranged, I felt something lift inside me. Not revenge, not bitterness, just peace. I didn't need to prove anything to the people who cast me aside. They weren't watching anyway. And even if they were, they wouldn't recognize the woman standing here now. Sometimes, I'd catch myself wondering if my mother ever told anyone about what happened, if she felt even an ounce of guilt, if Lena ever confessed how she whispered those words into my ear. But I never reached out. Not to check, not to scold, not to ask for closure, because I didn't want it anymore. They didn't break me. They revealed me. And once I saw what I was capable of without them, I never looked back. The money they gave to Lena? She burned through it. Of course she did. A failed attempt at opening an art cafe downtown, rent she couldn't cover, a vacation that restored her energy but drained her credit. Eventually, I heard from a mutual friend that Lena had moved back in with them. The golden girl. The constant emergency. The center of their universe, still needing to be rescued. Meanwhile, I was flying to Italy for a summer wedding, coordinating florists in Lisbon, hand-picking silk linens for a black tie vow renewal in Napa. They chose Lena, but I chose me, and that choice changed everything. The last message I ever received from my father was a short email. "Would love to talk. I think we all miss you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because I had already said everything I needed to, through the life I built in their silence. I never explained why I cut them off, and I never will, because healing doesn't require an audience. It requires boundaries, and mine was this: you don't get to hurt me. Then ask for access to the woman who rose from it. 3 years later, we threw the kind of event that silenced rooms. Not because it was loud, not because it screamed wealth or status, but because every detail whispered intention, power, healing. It wasn't just a vow renewal, it was a reclamation, and we held it in the south of France, at a private estate tucked between the lavender fields and old stone vineyards of Provence. There was no invitation in the mail, no family group text, no extended olive branch to the people who once told me, in every unspoken way, that I could be replaced. This celebration was not for them. It was for the ones who had shown up when no one else did. Our closest friends, mentors who saw us long before we saw ourselves, clients who had become family, people who knew our story, not as gossip, but as legacy. We arrived 3 days before the guests, just to soak it in. The estate was everything I'd once dreamed about as a girl planning a wedding from a kitchen table with overdue bills and a lukewarm mug of tea. Stone walls lined with ivy, tiled courtyards echoing soft acoustic music, long banquet tables draped in hand-stitched linen flown in from Florence, the kind of place where nothing had to be said to be felt. Custom menus, signature cocktails named after our journey, favors wrapped in silk, embroidered with every guest's initials. No seating chart anxiety, no passive-aggressive speeches, no one glaring across the table, just laughter, candles, soft jazz at golden hour, and joy. Real, unforced, earned joy. I wore a dress made by a designer who had once been our client. She surprised me with it 3 months before the event. "You gave me the wedding of my dreams," she said. "Now let me dress you for yours." My partner wore a suit tailored in Milan, every stitch hand-measured while we shared wine with the tailor's grandmother. This time, nothing was budgeted out of necessity. Everything was chosen with care, not to prove a point, to honor what we had survived. We renewed our vows beneath a canopy of olive branches strung with soft white lights. The sun dipped behind the hills as we spoke. This time the words were lighter. Not because we had less to promise, because we knew exactly what we were saying yes to. This love had been through fire, and it was still here. Stronger, braver, unshaken. The media coverage was inevitable. We'd built a brand that quietly reshaped the industry. When word got out that Vow and Bloom was hosting a private founder celebration, the blogs speculated. The bridal publication sent photographers. Influencers begged for details. But we didn't share much. Just one professional reel. No interviews, no inside scoop. Just enough to be seen. And we were. My old college roommate forwarded me a Facebook post from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. "Is this her?" they had commented, under a photo of us standing on the edge of a vineyard, champagne in hand, surrounded by light. Yes, it was. It was the girl they ignored, the one they thought could carry it all, now radiant, unapologetic, and no longer asking for a seat at anyone's table, because she'd built her own. I'm told that when the event made the rounds on social media, my mother saw it. A mutual acquaintance reposted one of the industry features with the caption, "Powerhouse behind Vow and Bloom stuns in destination celebration." She apparently didn't say much, just stared at her phone and murmured, "Is this our daughter?" "No," I wanted to say. "Not your daughter. Not anymore." A week after we returned, a floral arrangement arrived at our office. Massive, expensive, pointless, no card. But I knew who it was from. I didn't bring it home. I didn't even bring it inside. I told the assistant to leave it out back, near the compost. That's what you do with things that rot early and pretty. Later that day, we held a private dinner with our team, the ones who'd been with us since year one. I stood up, raised my glass, and said something I hadn't planned. 10 years ago, someone told me I didn't need their gift, that I'd be fine without it. They were right, but not in the way they meant. I didn't just survive without their gift. I became one. The room clapped. My partner kissed my cheek. And for the first time in years, I felt full. Not just successful, not just respected. Whole. I used to think the ultimate revenge would be rubbing it in their faces, proving that I was worth it, that they made the wrong choice, that the daughter they ignored had become a name in rooms they'd never enter. But standing on the edge of that vineyard, hearing my vows echo off the hillside, I didn't need revenge. I needed freedom. And I had it. In every laugh, in every hug, in every look exchanged between people who had shown up again and again. This wasn't just a celebration, it was a declaration. You don't have to burn bridges when you've already built a better road. The message came on a Thursday afternoon. I was reviewing event mock-ups for a winter wedding in Prague, sipping espresso on our office balcony, when my assistant buzzed in. "There's a voicemail you might want to hear," she said, cautious. I didn't listen to all of it, but it's from someone named Lena. I froze. Not from pain, not from fear, from recognition. Like hearing a song you forgot existed. I nodded. Forward it. I didn't play it at first. I stared at the file for nearly an hour before I finally let it play. Alone, door closed, phone turned face down. Her voice was thinner now. No smirk, no edge, just a flatness I didn't recognize. "Hey, it's me. I know you probably won't answer. I wouldn't either. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Things haven't been easy." Pause. "They cut me off, you know. Mom and Dad. Said I've taken enough. I guess now they think I'm too much. Ironic, right?" Another pause. "If there's any chance we could talk, just talk, I'd appreciate it." End of message. Later that evening, I found an email from my mother. It was short. "We miss you. We made mistakes. Can we have dinner?" Underneath was a photo I hadn't seen in years. Me and Lena in matching dresses. Easter, maybe. I was holding a stuffed bunny. She was tugging at mine with both fists. Even then, I had learned to let go. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. They didn't just hurt me, they redefined me without my permission, until I finally took the narrative back. I opened Instagram that night, scrolled through the private event gallery. There was one photo I kept going back to. I was standing in the center of the courtyard in Provence, surrounded by people who had flown across oceans for no reason other than love. I was in full couture, gold-stitched silk, hair pinned in soft waves, the kind of look no one had ever imagined for me because they never thought I'd belong in that world. But there I was, laughing, unapologetic, untouchable. I posted it. No caption for a few minutes, just the image. Let it breathe. Then, 10 minutes later, I added the words, "Not everything you steal is worth keeping." No tags, no explanation, no context. I didn't need to name them. They would know. Within an hour, I saw that Lena had tried to view the story. Blocked. An hour after that, my mother's account sent a friend request. Declined. I closed the app. Not out of pettiness, but peace. The silence I gave them wasn't punishment. It was protection. For me. They had tried to teach me that love had to hurt, that grace meant shrinking, that survival was noble only if done quietly. They were wrong. My love didn't shrink. It expanded. Past them. Beyond what they ever imagined for me. I built an empire from the ashes of a gift I never received. And I made sure they would never step foot inside it. People always ask me if I regret cutting them off, if I ever wanted reconciliation, closure, justice. But what they don't understand is that sometimes walking away is justice. Sometimes the loudest answer is no answer at all. Sometimes you don't heal by reuniting. You heal by remembering who you are when no one is draining your light. I didn't post anything else that month, just that one photo. It made its rounds, quietly, powerfully. Friends messaged, old clients shared it, even strangers commented. This feels like vindication. It was, but more than that, it was release. I never received another voicemail, no second email, no surprise visit. Eventually, I imagine, they stopped looking, because people like that don't chase what they never valued. They move on to softer targets, people who still believe they'll change. But I stopped believing a long time ago, right around the time my parents handed my wedding gift to someone else and called it compassion. Right around the time Lena leaned in and whispered betrayal into my ear and dared me to pretend she hadn't. Right around the time I realized the best thing I'd ever done for myself was leaving them exactly where they left me, behind. I didn't need the money, but they'll never understand what they truly gave away, because it wasn't a check, it wasn't support, it wasn't even love, it was access, and they lost it. Final line. They gave my wedding gift away, but I turned it into an empire and made sure they'd never step foot in it. Be honest with me, did you think I acted right? If so, subscribe and let me know in the comments.